What if I told you that the missiles launched from Tehran tonight were already flight-tested 2,600 years ago? What if the military maps currently on the screens of the Pentagon were actually drawn by a man in iron chains on a muddy riverbank in Babylon? The world thinks this is a modern war for gas, oil and territory, but they are wrong. This is a ritual. This is a scripted execution, and the clock is about to strike midnight. You're watching the Forbidden Bible, where the hidden war of angels and demons, the ancient prophecies sealed for the last days, and the forbidden mysteries of Scripture are revealed with cinematic clarity. If you're new here, subscribe and tap the bell icon, because what you're about to discover may change the way you understand heaven, the unseen realm, and your place within it. They call me the Watchman. I stand on the walls of history, looking through a lens that bypasses the propaganda of 2026. I am here to guide you through a map phrased in the dust of antiquity. You are not here by accident. You've sensed the shifting of the tectonic plates of global power. You've seen the headlines that don't make sense. Tonight, we open a file that was classified by the divine mainframe long before the first Roman legion ever marched. To truly understand the fire raining down on the Middle East tonight, we must first confront a man who has been dead for over 2.5 millennia. His name was Ezekiel. But don't think of him as a dry religious figure. In 593 BC, Ezekiel was a high-value political prisoner, dragged from the streets of Jerusalem to a refugee camp on the banks of the Chebar River. It was in this moment of total darkness that the heavens tore open. Ezekiel was given backdoor access to the divine mainframe of history. He was shown a global conflict that would remain impossible and geologically unthinkable for the next 2,600 years. Let's open the file. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 2. God speaks to him, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal." Stop right there. We need to decode the linguistics. The word chief in the original Hebrew text is Rosh. For centuries, scholars have pointed out that Rosh is not just a title, it is a geographic marker. In ancient texts, the people to the far north of the Black Sea were the Roz or Rus. Draw a straight line from Jerusalem through the North Pole. Today you land directly on the Kremlin in Moscow. Ezekiel was identifying a northern superpower that didn't even exist as a unified entity in his day. But why would this giant care about a tiny strip of land? Ezekiel provides the answer in verse 4. "I will put hooks into your jaws and bring you out." This is terrifying. It implies that the leader of Magog, this Gog figure, isn't attacking because he wants to. He is being dragged by forces beyond his control. In 2026, those hooks are visible to anyone: the Strait of Hormuz, the Leviathan gas fields, the 20-year strategic pact between Russia and Iran. Russia provides the Guard the military shield, S-400S, and satellite intel, while Iran provides the boots on the ground. Ezekiel saw this protectorate 26 centuries ago. He saw the company, the Kahal, nations with no historical reason to be allies, now united by a singular burning hatred. What Ezekiel wrote was not a sermon. It was a classified intelligence briefing for our generation. A coalition impossible in 500 BC, impossible in 1500 AD, and only possible now. The evil thought is forming. The hooks are sinking in. And Ezekiel, the man in chains, is still the only one who knows how this briefing ends. I am the Watchman, and the watch has just begun. Before the evil thought could even form in the mind of the northern leader, a miracle of biological and national resurrection had to take place on the mountains of Israel. Ezekiel chapter 37 is often called the vision of the dry bones, but within these forbidden records, we call it the assembly manual for a war machine. Imagine the prophet Ezekiel standing in a vast, desolate canyon. The ground is carpeted with bones, not fresh, wet corpses, but bones that are described in the Hebrew text as yabesh, meaning parched, bleached, and utterly devoid of life. God asks Ezekiel, "Son of man, can these bones live?" If you asked a historian in the year 1800, they would have laughed. For 1,878 years, the Jewish people were the ghosts of history. After the Roman legions under Titus burned Jerusalem in 70 AD, and Emperor Hadrian renamed the land Palestina to erase its Jewish identity, the nation was officially dead. They were scattered across the four corners of the planet, from the freezing steppes of Russia to the crowded ghettos of Europe and the deserts of North Africa. They had no king, no central government, no standing army, and no common soil. By every law of sociology, they should have disappeared like the ancient Hittites or the Jebusites. But Ezekiel saw a rattling. He saw the bones moving toward one another. He saw sinews weave together and flesh stretch over the frame. Centuries later, the prophet Isaiah caught the same transmission in chapter 66, verse 8, asking the ultimate rhetorical question, "Who has ever heard of such a thing? Can a country be born in a day, or a nation be brought forth in a moment?" The world received the answer on May 14, 1948. In a single afternoon, as the British mandate ended, David Ben-Gurion stood in a museum in Tel Aviv and breathed life into the dry bones. Against all odds, after nearly 2 millennia of exile, Israel was reborn. The prophet Amos had confirmed this in chapter 9, stating that once God planted them back in their soil, they would never be uprooted again. Think about the statistical impossibility. A dead nation scattered for 2,000 years, reviving a dead language, Hebrew, and reclaiming its original capital. It is a biological and political miracle that has happened only once in human history. But why does Ezekiel link this miracle to a global war? Look at the specific environment he describes in chapter 38, verse 8. He says the invasion happens against a land that had been continually waste. This isn't just poetic filler. This is a forensic observation. When Mark Twain visited Palestine in 1867, he wrote in The Innocents Abroad that the land was a silent, mournful expanse where even weeds refused to grow. He called it a wasteland. Ezekiel predicted that the land would stay barren until the bones returned. Since 1948, we have witnessed a transformation that defies environmental science. The waste places are now the high-tech orchards of the world. The flesh Ezekiel saw is the skyline of Tel Aviv, the desalination plants of Ashdod, and the multi-billion-dollar Leviathan gas fields. However, Ezekiel adds a chilling detail about the state of this nation at the moment of the Gog and Magog attack. He describes Israel as a land of unwalled villages where people dwell securely. This is the prophetic paradox. How can a nation surrounded by millions of enemies who openly call for its destruction ever dwell securely? The answer lies in the Iron Wall. Over the last 75 years, Israel has built the most sophisticated defense architecture in human history. They didn't build stone walls, they built digital ones. They relied on the Iron Dome to snatch missiles out of the sky. They relied on the Arrow 3 to intercept fire in space. They relied on AI-driven border sensors and the legendary reputation of the Mossad. This technological supremacy created a psychological state of betash security. For decades, Israel believed its tech was an unbreakable shield. This prosperity and perceived safety is exactly what Ezekiel says triggers the evil thought in the mind of the northern leader. The plunder is no longer just gold and silver. It is the intellectual property, the cybersecurity data, and the energy sovereignty of the Eastern Mediterranean. But the most shocking twist in this assembly manual is the identity of the primary ally, Persia. To anyone in Ezekiel's day, this was a geographical and political absurdity. Persia, modern-day Iran, was the savior of the Jews. It was the Persian king, Cyrus the Great, who ended the Babylonian exile. It was Cyrus who paid for the Jews to go back and rebuild their temple. For 2,500 years, Persia and Israel were historical allies. The idea that Persia would one day lead a coalition to annihilate the Jewish state was as unthinkable as Canada invading the United States today. Yet, as we look at the headlines of 2026, the unthinkable has become the inevitable. The Cyrus alliance has been replaced by the Ayatollah conflict. The nation that once funded the rebuilding of the temple is now the nation funding the missiles aimed at its ruins. The bones have stood up. The army is exceedingly great. The desert has bloomed. And as the flesh appeared, so did the predator. The restoration of 1948 was not the final destination. It was the industrial-scale setting of a divine trap. God has used the miracle of Israel's rebirth as the magnet to draw the nations to their final judgment. The bones are no longer rattling. They are marching. And as the coalition from the north begins its descent, we realize that the peace of the unwalled village was only the silence before the storm. If the rebirth of Israel in 1948 was the miracle that started the clock, then the formation of the coalition of the North is the nightmare that signals midnight. To understand the gravity of the headlines in 2026, we have to look at the high-value target list. Ezekiel wrote in chapter 38, verses 2 through 6. This isn't just a list of ancient tribes. It is a high-definition GPS coordinate system for a modern-day axis of power that defies every law of historical alliance. Let's start with the head of the serpent, Magog. As we decoded, the leader is called Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh. Modern intelligence and geographic history confirm what Ezekiel saw from his riverbank. The power center located to the uttermost north of Jerusalem is Moscow. But in 2026, Russia's role isn't just about boots on the ground or Cold War-era tanks. Ezekiel describes Gog as a guard for the other nations. In the original Hebrew, the word is mishmar, which means a sentinel, a protector, or a military covering force. Look at the current military reality described in our sample intel. Russia has deployed 400 and 500 air defense systems across the Middle East, creating a no-fly zone that shields the movements of the coalition. But the real Gog-Magog connection is digital. As confirmed in the second Kichban, Russia launched the Kayam satellite for Iran. Why is this the smoking gun of prophecy? Because for the first time in 2,600 years, Persia has eyes in the sky, high-resolution surveillance capable of monitoring every Israeli airbase, every hidden bunker, and every unwalled village in real time. This is the guard that Ezekiel saw a northern superpower providing the technological umbrella for a southern invasion. Without the Russian guard, the Persian fire would be blind. The Kayam satellite is not merely a telecommunications tool, it provides a 1.2-meter high-resolution imagery. This means Gog is giving Persia the ability to see every Israeli tank, every missile launcher, and every movement within the unwalled villages from space, a strategic capability previously reserved only for global superpowers. This is the digital backbone of the Magog invasion. Then, we move to the most dangerous and illogical player in the file, Persia, known today as Iran. This is where the prophecy becomes truly spooky. As noted in Sample 2, historically, Persia was the greatest benefactor of the Jewish people. It was the Persian king Cyrus who issued the decree to end the first Babylonian exile and even funded the rebuilding of the Second Temple. For 2.5 millennia, Persians and Jews were strategic allies. Even as recently as the 1970s, under the Shah, Iran and Israel were partners in energy and intelligence. How did a captive priest in 593 BC know that this ancient bond would snap? The 1979 Islamic Revolution wasn't just a political shift, it was the precise repositioning of a prophetic chess piece. Today, the nation that once freed Israel is the primary engine of a coalition dedicated to its total annihilation. But the crescent of fire doesn't stop with Iran. Ezekiel names Cush and Put. These correspond to modern-day Sudan and Libya. Look at a map of 2026. Libya is a fractured state, a playground for Russian mercenaries and Iranian-aligned militias. Sudan has been pulled into the military orbit of the Axis, serving as a weapons corridor. Together with Iran in the east and Russia in the north, these nations form a lethal pincer movement, surrounding Israel on 3 sides. The real Trojan horse, however, is Gomer and Beth Togarmah, modern-day Turkey. This should be impossible. Turkey is a member of NATO. It houses U.S. nuclear warheads. It is technically an ally of the West. Yet, Ezekiel saw Turkey turning its face away from Europe and toward the Islamic coalition of the North. In recent years, we have watched Turkey's leadership call for a union of Islamic nations to march against Jerusalem, exactly as the bands of the far north described in verse 6. Ezekiel saw a NATO member sitting in the Gog and Magog war room 2,600 years before NATO was even conceived. What is the evil thought that binds these unlikely allies? Ezekiel says it is to seize plunder. In 2026, the plunder has evolved. It is no longer just about cattle and gold. It is about the Leviathan gas fields in the Mediterranean, a direct threat to Russia's energy monopoly over Europe. It is about Israel's cyber supremacy and the plunder of intellectual property. Gog is not leading a religious crusade, he is leading a resource grab. Ezekiel didn't just see a war, he saw a cyberkinetic hybrid conflict. He saw a moment where the world's most unlikely allies, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, would be forced into a corner by economic necessity and religious zeal. The hooks in the jaws are sinking in. As Russia provides the satellite guard and Iran prepares the ballistic fire, the coalition Ezekiel named is finally ready to move. The company is assembled, the GPS is locked, and the man in chains by the river Chebar is still the only one who can tell us what happens when the first missile is fired. While the world's attention is locked on the radar, screens of Aegis destroyers and the flight paths of hypersonic missiles, a much older and more dangerous countdown is reaching zero in the heart of Judea. To understand why the Al-Aqsa flood was launched on October 7th and why the Middle East has become a global tinderbox in 2026, you have to look past the military hardware. You have to look at a biological miracle that most modern secularists find absurd, yet world leaders fear: the Red Heifer. According to the ancient laws found in the Book of Numbers, chapter 19, the restoration of the Third Temple requires a specific supernatural catalyst, the ashes of a heifer that is perfectly red, unblemished, and has never worn a yoke for nearly 2,000 years. This was a theological impossibility. The lineage was lost, the ritual dormant. Only 9 such heifers had ever been confirmed in Jewish history since the time of Moses. But in 2021, the world's prophetic clock suddenly accelerated. Not 1, but 5 red heifers were born on a secret ranch in Texas. The mathematical odds of this occurring naturally are truly staggering. Some experts say it's a 1 in a billion event. To the religious mind, this wasn't a fluke of genetics, it was a divine appointment. But this isn't just about ancient livestock. It is about a collision of hidden realities. Our modern consensus reality is breaking down before our eyes. We are now living in an era where leaked documents, such as the infamous Epstein files, have pulled back the curtain on sinister, cultish behaviors within the highest echelons of global society. These elites aren't just playing for political power or money. Many are obsessed with the occult and the fulfillment of ancient scripts. To these shadow players, the red heifer is more than a religious symbol. It is a geopolitical tool to manufacture an apocalyptic climax and usher in a new global order. In September 2022, when these 5 heifers arrived at Ben Gurion Airport under heavy security, it triggered a seismic reaction across the Islamic world. Why? Because the proposed site for the Third Temple is the exact platform where the Dome of the Rock currently stands. Building the temple isn't a simple construction project. It necessitates the demolition of one of Islam's holiest sites. This is the ultimate detonator for a world-ending religious war. By January 2024, the masked spokesman for Hamas, Abu Obaida, shattered the silence by confirming that the bringing of the red cows was a primary reason for the October 7th invasion. They didn't see animals, they saw a countdown reaching midnight, and they launched a preemptive strike to halt a ritual they believed would end their world. This ritual is not a hypothetical theory. The Temple Institute has publicly announced plans to train priests and prepare sacred vessels for the moment the 10th red heifer in history is ready. This preparation is why Hamas named their operation the Al-Aqsa Flood, a desperate attempt to stop the shifting of the status quo on the Temple Mount before the ritual purification could begin. The narrative turns even more chilling when we examine the prophetic timing. Intelligence within fringe research circles suggests a secret purification rehearsal took place in Shiloh on the 1st of July. This date wasn't chosen at random. In the Jewish calendar, it coincided exactly with the reading of the Torah portion Chukat, the very chapter that mandates the laws of the red heifer. The precision required to align a covert ceremony with such a meaningful historical moment suggests that the actors on this stage are not merely reacting to news, they are following an archetypal script programmed into the collective, unconscious of humanity. This collective programming is what makes the war of Gog and Magog feel so inevitable. We are witnessing an ancient ancestral feud rising from the dust. When national leaders today invoke the name of Amalek, they aren't just using a metaphor, they are signaling a zero-sum conflict, the total erasure of an opponent. It is a kill or be killed mentality that predates modern diplomacy. And as the blood moon of March 3rd, 2026 stained the night sky over Jerusalem, that apocalyptic expectation reached a fever pitch. To the secular world, it was an eclipse. To the forbidden Bible, it was a signature of judgment written in the stars. The evil thought Ezekiel spoke of is no longer just a desire for land or gas. It is being driven by the ashes of these red cows and the spiritual energy they release. The ritual provides the sanctification for a new temple, while the hooks in the jaws of Gog drag the northern nations into the furnace of the Middle East. We aren't just watching a battle for borders. We are watching the final cleansing of the Earth's stage. The Red Heifers have moved from a Texas ranch to the center of a global firestorm. The ashes are prepared. The spirits of Amalek are marching, and the world is about to find out what happens when ancient ritual collides with 21st century ballistics. In the high-stakes world of global intelligence, what doesn't happen is often a louder alarm than what does. As we decode Ezekiel's 2,600-year-old classified briefing, we are forced to confront a geopolitical paradox: the missing nations. In Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 13, the prophet identifies a specific group of nations that stand on the sidelines, refusing to join the northern slaughter. They don't mobilize. They don't fire. Instead, they issue a cynical, mocking question to the coalition. Have you come to seize plunder? Ezekiel names them Sheba and Dedan, and the merchants of Tarshish. Let's solve this geographical puzzle. To anyone holding a satellite map in 2026, Sheba and Dedan are 100% matches for the ancient kingdoms of the Arabian Peninsula, the modern territories of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain. For 70 years, the idea of these nations standing neutral while Israel was attacked was a geopolitical joke. These were the architects of oil embargoes and the financiers of jihad. Yet, Ezekiel saw a moment in the latter days where these traditional enemies would suddenly choose trade, technology, and stability over the chaos of war. We are watching this through the Abraham Accords and the silent normalization between Riyadh and Jerusalem. They have calculated that Israel's high-tech plunder is better shared than destroyed. But this silence isn't just about oil and gas. It is part of a spiritual turning of the tables that involves the ghost of Purim. You see, the conflict between Israel and Iran is a modern reenactment of the Book of Esther. In that ancient scroll, a high official of the Persian Empire named Haman, a descendant of the ancient bloodline of Amalek, plotted the total annihilation of the Jewish people. Today, as the Ayatollahs in Tehran call for the erasure of the Zionist entity, they are channeling that same ancient spirit. Here is the detail the mainstream media is too terrified to mention. The death of the Iranian supreme leader in the 2026 strikes occurred precisely during the window of Purim, the very festival celebrating the execution of Haman and his 10 sons on the gallows they built for their enemies. This wasn't a military coincidence, it was a ritual. Our research into the Epstein files and other leaked intelligence suggests that secret societies and elite cults in the highest echelons of power are obsessed with this prophetic timing. These shadow players, the deep state of the West, understand that power is a ritual. By orchestrating the decapitation of the Persian leadership on the day of Purim, they are signaling to their occult networks that the spirit of Amalek has been ritually defeated. They are using the forbidden Bible as a strategic manual to manufacture an apocalyptic climax for their own geopolitical advantage. However, while these cults think they are the puppet masters, Ezekiel reveals they are the ones with hooks in their jaws. In verse 4, God says to Gog, "I will put hooks into your jaws and bring you out." In the ancient world, a hook was used to drag a violent beast into judgment. This implies a total loss of free will. The leaders of Russia, Iran, and Turkey believe they are the masters of their own grand strategy. Putin thinks he is securing energy dominance over Europe via the Leviathan gas fields. The Ayatollahs think they are fulfilling a theological mandate, but they are being dragged by a force they cannot see. The hook in 2026 is the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's oil flows through this choke point. When the coalition disrupts this flow, they believe they have the world by the throat. But in reality, they are setting the hook deeper into their own jaws. They are being pulled by a divine gravity toward a desert war they never wanted. The missing nations of Saudi Arabia and the UAE see this ritual playing out. They see the spirit of Amalek being struck. They see the merchants of Tarshish, the Western powers, asking about plunder, while their young lions stand ready. In prophetic language, if Great Britain is the old lion, Tarshish, then the young lions are its former colonies, including the United States, Canada, and Australia. Ezekiel saw a moment when the entire West, along with the wealthy Arab nations, would merely stand by and ask weak diplomatic questions instead of intervening militarily to save Israel from the sword of Magog. Everything is in place. The missing nations have chosen their side by remaining silent. The God of Magog has failed to protect the Persian leader from the ghost of Purim. The elite secret societies are celebrating their manufactured victory, unaware that they too are being led to the gallows. The blood moon of March 2026 was the signature in the sky, confirming that the ancient feud has reached its peak. The hooks are set, the nations are separated, and the man in chains by the river Chebar is telling us that the fury of the Almighty is about to boil over in a way no deep state or military general can survive. The stage is set for the final supernatural intervention. As the armies of Gog and Magog reach the mountains of Israel, the military analysts at the Pentagon and the Kremlin are expecting a conventional slaughter. They are calculating the impact of hypersonic missiles and the effectiveness of iron beam defenses. But Ezekiel's 2,600-year-old script tells us that at the very moment the invasion peaks, physics as we know it will cease to function. We are moving from the realm of geopolitics into the realm of supernatural intervention. In Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 19, God declares, "In my jealousy and in my blazing wrath, I declare that on that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel." This is not a localized tremor. The text describes a seismic event so massive that the mountains shall be thrown down, and the cliffs shall fall, and every wall shall tumble to the ground. This is the first signature of the Almighty. Just as the coalition forces prepare to launch their final ground assault, the very earth beneath their feet will betray them. But the earthquake is only the beginning of the chaos. In verse 21, we see the psychological collapse of the invaders. Every man's sword will be against his brother. In the pitch-black dust of the crumbling mountains, the various factions of the coalition, Persians, Turks, Sudanese, and Russians, will lose their ability to identify friend from foe. In the 21st century, this is known as a catastrophic failure of command and control. The sophisticated GPS and satellite links of the Magog army will be rendered useless by the divine signature, leading to a frantic, self-inflicted massacre. Then comes the fire from the sky. Ezekiel describes a bombardment of pestilence and bloodshed, torrential rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur. To a 21st century observer, this sounds like a terrifying mix of a solar flare, volcanic eruption, and something even more exotic. Some fringe researchers suggest this could be the result of a pole shift or a cosmic event triggered by the alignment of the blood moon. Whatever the source, the result is the total disintegration of the Magog coalition. They don't fall by the hand of the IDF. They fall by the fury of the Creator. As the smoke clears, the prophecy shifts from destruction to a detail that has baffled historians for centuries. In Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 9, we are told that the inhabitants of Israel will go out and burn the weapons of the fallen armies for 7 years. They will not gather wood from the forest. The discarded military hardware will be their fuel. Think about the precision of that number, 7 years. Why 7? In biblical prophecy, 7 is the number of completion, but it also points to the 70th week of Daniel, the final 7-year period known as the Great Tribulation. This implies that the war of Gog and Magog is the curtain raiser for the final act of human history. If the weapons are being burned for 7 years, it suggests that the world has entered a state where conventional energy and technology have failed. Or perhaps these advanced weapons are made of a combustible material that we are only now beginning to develop. The forbidden intelligence suggests that the secret societies and the deep state actors we discussed in Chapter 5 are terrified of this specific timeline. They want to manufacture their own new world order, but the 7-year burning period tells them that their control is an illusion. The missing nations of the Gulf and the merchants of Tarshish will watch as the superpower of the North is erased, leaving a power vacuum that will eventually be filled by a leader whom the Bible calls the Antichrist. The battlefield of Magog becomes a valley of Hamon-Gog, a place of burial that will take 7 months to cleanse. The cleanup operation is described with a detail that sounds eerily like a nuclear or biological decontamination protocol. Ezekiel speaks of special men employed to search the land, marking every bone they find so the land can be purified. This level of detail in an ancient text describing mass burial, specialized cleanup crews, and the use of weapons as fuel is a signature of authenticity that cannot be ignored. The war of Gog and Magog ends not with a peace treaty, but with a revelation. God says, "I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel." The evil thought of the elite has been shattered. The ghost of Purim has claimed its victory. And as the people of Israel begin their 7-year task of burning the remnants of the world's most advanced army, the message to the remaining nations is clear. The clock has reached 0. The age of man's rebellion is coming to an end. The hooks have done their job, and the Creator of the heavens is no longer silent. We have decoded the nations. We have identified the guard and the fire. We have seen the Red Heifers in their stalls and the ghost of Purim haunting the halls of Tehran. But as we reach the end of Ezekiel's classified briefing, we must ask the most uncomfortable question of all. Why was this shown to us? The war of Gog and Magog is not a story meant to produce fear. It is a revelation meant to produce faith. In Ezekiel 38, verse 23, God declares his ultimate objective. "I will magnify myself and sanctify myself and make myself known in the eyes of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord." This war is the great awakening of human history. The same God who breathed life into the dry bones of Israel in 1948 is the same God who will descend in fire in 2026. He kept the first promise. He will keep this one too. But this isn't just about the fate of empires or the movements of global deep state cults. This is about you. You are not watching this video by accident. In a world of manufactured chaos, where the elite are obsessed with ancient rituals and the hooks are dragging humanity toward the brink, there is a kingdom that no coalition can touch and no missile can reach. The 2,600-year-old script tells us that the kingdoms of man will fail, the secret societies will be exposed, and the young lions of Tarshish will stand powerless. But the word of God stands forever. As you watch the headlines this week, remember, the news is not breaking. It is ancient history playing out in high definition. The stage is armed, the actors are in position, and the director is about to call for the final act. If you have never looked up from the screen of your life to the author of the story, today is the day. The name above every coalition, every supreme leader, and every ancient ghost is Jesus Christ. He is the one Ezekiel's temple points to. He is the one the Red Heifer ceremony prefigures. He is the Prince of Peace in a world addicted to war. Don't be troubled by the roar of the north. Look up, for your redemption is drawing near. Share this briefing with someone who is still sleeping through the countdown. Leave your thoughts in the comments, not as a political debate, but as a testimony to prophecy fulfilled. The clock has struck midnight. The forbidden Bible has been opened. Are you ready for what comes next? I am the Watchman. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next chapter of the end of the age. God bless you.